So we're here another week at Mutant Worlds, and we're really happy because today is a party. We have a lot of guests, and we're gonna talk about Generation X, the 1994 run, and we're gonna talk about like everything that we can on the run because like there's probably a lot to unpack, and we have a very amazing guest. We have Rain from Carefree Black Nerve, who is there and who already has come to the show like many times, and probably the show was Rain's idea, like in the first place. He's also having a Smell Like Teen Mutants
Yes,
project that is especially about Generation X and goes through
yes.
every issue. So
Hmm.
he's like very into the subject. And we also have Elsie and Keenan from Another Relaunch, which is a podcast that is pretty cool. I recommend everyone to check out. They talk from older comics to like new releases and stuff, and just like everything comics. Just if you like this thing, you're gonna like their thing. And then we have Seal from Lesbian Jubilee, and Seal has already come to the show before, but today we're gonna talk about probably about Jubilee a while. So that should come up. So that's that's it, and let's roll it.
This week on Mutant Watch.
So first of all, why Generation X? Why did you want to come to the show? Why do you want to talk about it? What is your emotional connection to this? And like how you discovered the book? Whatever of those questions that feels like it rings a bell, it probably rings more than one bell. So whoever wants to go first, maybe Rain. Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, good. I was over here. So, Generation X has been my all-time favorite, the quintessential X-Men book since I was, I don't know, able to read. I got into the X-Men early. I enjoyed what I saw, but as a kid, the '90s show and the comic books, they all look like grown people. So I loved them, yeah, but I was like, I'm 9 years old. What am I supposed to do with this? And so, um, I was very much into pop culture, like most kids around the early '90s, from music to fashion to all that. So when this new Phalanx Covenant happened, and there was these new kids like that I knew were coded as kids, and they were from like these different backgrounds. They were different shades. They looked to me like what the original X-Men probably should have looked like. I was all in. Monet, I'm gonna say right now, all time favorite. The most perfect mutant, the most perfect person. But no, it's that emotional connection from being a young kid, seeing myself in the comic in ways that I didn't really see myself in X-Men. And it was actually just by accident. Like I enjoy reading it, but I find myself really relating to those characters. Like again, from the music choice, from the art style to the clothing. Yeah, that's I love Generation X.
Hey,
I love that. I wish I had that same kind of connection with Generation X because I didn't when I was younger. Like I was obviously like really into the '90s show, like everybody else was, and all that kind of stuff. But Generation X didn't really like click for me. I didn't really get into them honestly until later. Like coming onto this, I was really hyped to do it because like these characters aren't my favorites, but I love hearing and talking to people about who their favorites are, and like, so then like maybe I can see things from a different perspective. Like I did not have that same kind of like hit when Generation X came up of like, oh, this is how they were supposed to look. I was like, oh, more Jubilee.
Oh
But
no.
yeah. So like hearing you guys talk about that, I'm loving that like there was this like impact from this team or whatever. Reading this, going back and reading this now and getting prepared for this, I kind of see it. Like Monet is that girl. I see it.
Yeah.
I do see it.
I can definitely agree with a little bit of that. I think the thing that kind of drove me to Generation X was, of course, knowing that they were the teen heroes. Again, we were younger when we first started reading comic books. So it's like back in the 90s, yeah, we were like 9, 10, 11, things like that. And so you're reading about these adults and you're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And it's like, yeah, you had the New Mutants around, but even then they were kind of like around college age during that time. So like Generation X was those groups that were closer to your age and you could kind of relate to a little bit more. I think a good thing for Generation X was that a lot of the kids in that group, they had physical mutations, and that like really helped drive home the mutant metaphor for this particular group. Whereas like you have so many X-Men outside of like Nightcrawler and Beast, everybody looks good. But here is Skin, who is very wrinkly. Here is Monet. She has this penance form. Here's Husk. Her power is like the grossest thing ever. She shuts your skin off. It's like, how else do you get close to the mutants without Generation X? And then like you had Maggot come on later on. It just really hit that point for me.
So I was like not even alive when the series was coming out.
Oh no! Don't say that.
Why would you
Don't
say
that?
Please, no. But I started getting interested in it in around like high school. I think it was one of the first comics that I was really interested in because my friend was like, "Hey, I think you would like Jubilee." Reading some of Jubilee's comics, and I started reading some of Generation X, and I just really liked the dynamics between the kids. I found it very endearing, and I liked that they were like racially diverse because I was like surprised by that a little bit, I guess, because I had this idea of comics as like all these white men, so it was nice to see something different from that.
Okay, I guess I'll go before Duna. So my intro to Gen X was a little bit weird, and Generation X actually is my introduction to the X-Men purely by accident because I was reading Gen 13 at the time, and my young brain accidentally bought Gen X and was very confused when I started reading it. But once I started reading it, I was absolutely hooked. Chamber and Husk are two of my all-time favorite X-Men characters. And there's just something about Generation X that really pegs the sense of otherness that is supposed to be inherent in the X-Men. These are the outsiders among the outsiders. And as a queer Latinx boy growing up in the early mid 90s and 2000s, that's not something I saw on TV. It was something that I didn't think had a story to be told, is that sense of other. And it was great to kind of relate to that, even though I didn't know why I was relating to it.
So this released the year I was born, 1994. And but I have, yeah,
You're not alone.
So obviously I also wasn't around for reading it. I was a baby, but one of the things that really called me to it is one of the things that called me to a lot of things that I like as a teenager. That was like, I like a lot of emo music. I like grunge. I like those kind of aesthetics. And when I saw a cover of this, I was instantly into it without knowing what the story was about. The style just called to me a lot. And it's this kind of alternative style that is associated with just that subcultures that I was pretty much a part of. So that was why I picked up the book. And then I absolutely love it. Like most people have said here, this book really does this stuff of like having mutants that actually deal with mutanthood in deeper ways than usually X-Men does. They deal with being visibly mutant. They deal with facing other types of oppression, not only being a mutant. And they deal with all this stuff more or less in a way that is like relevant or whatever, but at least those things happen explicitly in the book a couple of times that I'm sure we'll talk about more later. And so that was what really like kept me in the book, even if the thing that made me like buy it was definitely the aesthetics. Like I was like, this book is so goth, and I'm in for everything goth. So that was the main thing at the beginning. So, and then I want to ask you all, and I'm really, really interested about this. What is your favorite characters? Who is your favorite character from this book? Why? And if you have any story, any particular story from the book, maybe to begin to talk other things as we. Yeah, that would be the second question.
I can kick this off and say that like because I didn't have the biggest connection with all these characters, I was going in like, all right, who am I gonna like really connect with here, or at least like walk away with a different kind of like outlook on them? And I have to say, it's Sync. You know, I have known about him obviously because like he's just the cool looking black kid with the rainbow. So like you can kind of figure out who he is, but I'd never really like read too much of him because I never really got too much into the Generation X stuff. And by the time I was really reading comics, he was dead. So like I didn't really see him as much anymore. But shout out to him being on the X-Men team currently and getting that like push. We like that. And I would have to say like he has been my favorite one so far. His powers are cool. They're like an extension of Rogues without like all the the mess that comes with Rogue's powers. So you get to be Sync or whatever, and not only that, like you have them at the better ability. So I think that's dope. Sync was definitely like the takeaway for me. I also will say that like Monet was someone before reading this that I never really saw it for. I'm not gonna lie. I know. I'm gonna be honest. I was like, okay, she's the fun, sassy girl, whatever. But reading this, like, I see it. She's fun. She's she's what I wish Emma was.
Yes.
There you go. I'll follow up with that. I think I was actually one of the folks. Monet was like always on my radar. Like I think she is like a very fun girl. She is the sassy girl. I think a lot of stuff you want from Emma you see in her. But I also think once you kind of get deeper into her story with like Penance and the twins and Emplate and things like that, there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. I'm a sucker for like very heavy character dynamics and interpersonal relationships in my comics. So it's like when you add that family into that, it's like how much deeper can you get? And I always think about Pad and how he kind of took that further in X Factor, when he had her in therapy and just, having those fears of the Penance form coming back. And then again, you just have this relationship with this brother who was kind of abusing her in a way. And I just think that's really interesting. And while I get that we all love the fun, sassy, perfect girl, I really do love when they peel back those layers and get into why she is the way she is. And it's great. And then they tried to give like her that pseudo connection to Bishop at one point in time. So I was like, Bishop was my guy, so I was all here for it. Not so much here for it anymore, but like back then, yeah, I was all about it.
You don't want them to have a connection now?
It's weird. I don't think Bishop needs family in the present day.
Yeah, I see people really trying to like make that, the Storm thing.
Oh, no.
Okay, I can talk, so I'm trying not to.
Go for it.
Go for it.
We're listening.
So my favorite is definitely Sync and Monet. But if I had to choose between them, it's definitely Monet. Sync for me, even though he was a kid, he always looked like an adult to me because, again, black hair and artists in the 90s, like just shave his head off. That's easier for them.
To this day.
I was going to say, the 90s.
Why this man don't have hair? But, that's, whatever. It is what it is. But Monet really is the one who I gravitated towards. And honestly, it's because for me, I was one of those gifted kids who, like, excelled, but I'm sure there's like some childhood trauma in there for that reason. But like I was always, oh, he's the smart one, or he's, his grades are always good, and if I got a B, I was upset. So like something about seeing that in a character, even though it was a girl, but then I'm queer as well, so I can identify with like Phoenix and be fine. Like it doesn't hurt my masculinity.
Same.
Monet, a black girl, a black, as all intents and purposes, Supergirl. Though her race and complexion is often convoluted and kind of wonky, there still was those instances of family that really stood out to me, because I like the Summers family drama. I like the Braddock's messed up line. And so to know that there was this perfect black girl with these twin sisters, this older brother, this royal mother, this ambassador father in this like weird mix up kind of more grounded version of a really twisted Summers line. I loved it. I loved everything about that. And then being a kid having to decipher what was what. Like when we got the Claudette and Nicole reveal, I was a child. That was like watching Endgame for me. I was like, when the smoke cleared and Sink had them on his lap, I was like, hold up. Then I went back as a kid looking at the cover. I'm like, okay, you see her shadow. Is this foreshadow? But yeah, so Monet and her whole twisted family has always been like, I've those are my cousins. You can't tell me those ain't my distant cousins. Yeah.
So for me, Jubilee has always been my favorite. I think in the first issue of Generation X, there's a great example of like what makes her so great. I think is like after there's like a fight at the airport while they're going to pick up Chamber, and like after the fight, like they're like everyone's like sort of figuring things out, and Jubilee turns to Chamber and she's like, welcome to Generation X. And I think that's just so sweet. Like it shows like her real compassion for others and her empathy and her ability to relate to others and like care about people, like even the people who like have nobody. Like her introduction pretty much her introduction is when she saves Wolverine, and it's like he was somebody who had nobody at the moment, but like she's there and she can save him. And so in Generation X here, like she is able to be a friend to Chamber. And so I think she's just a great character. But my second favorite is Monet. I love the family drama as well. Like as convoluted as it is, I feel like just like the complexity of it all, and it's all just really good, and I think they should push it in the current comics more than they do, but yeah.
So I've been going back and forth the whole time, and I can't pick just one. And I am tied between Chamber and Husk. Chamber is pretty straightforward, just because of, like Duna was saying, he is like pure like punk aesthetic, which is like little tiny wannabe goth Gabe was all about that, and just the style and the attitude, and in a way also the self-loathing that he had, is that he never feels like he is good enough. I did try to do a read through, but I am a procrastinator, so I didn't have time. But I did jump to the ending and read the ending. And Chambers, one of his final issues is him almost getting a girlfriend and then throwing the number out of the window because he is a mutant, and why would she wouldn't stay with a mutant for much longer. So despite the 75 issues of Generation X, he is still struggling with that loathing. And it comes up again when he shows up in Uncanny X-Men and in Weapon X, and he's always just trying to figure out how to be okay with himself. And that is something that I'll be shocked if not everyone can relate to that, at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a little bit the same thing with Paige, with Husk. I am a full-on Guthrie fanboy. I love the whole family. So I always was interested in her, but kind of looking back on it, it's very interesting the way that she struggles with who she is. She does all of this work to try to compensate for being a black, called out on the panel, a hick. So she studies, she works super hard. She's going to be an X-Men, she's going to be successful, and she spends all this time trying to avoid how she was born. And I really wish that they would do more with that, especially more recently, since they've really brushed that under the rug, and just, I don't even want to think about what they've done with Paige in the last like 10 years or so. But back then there was really something there that I think could have been pushed further. in terms of that growing acceptance that none of the other Guthrie children have ever went through.
I agree with you, Gabriel, but but I elaborate. I think it's gonna be Chamber for me. Even if I appreciate all the things that Gabriel said about Husk, I think in this run she's placed into a love interest place a lot of times, and in those places I don't connect that much with her. Even in other places, yes. But in Chamber, there's something about Jono that reminds me of things that I struggled a lot when I was a teenager with body dysmorphia and with dysphoria and a lot of other stuff that was really like it was the center of my life for a lot of years. All I was thinking about when interacting with other people was how they're gonna see me, how am I gonna come off to them, how am I gonna speak, how am I gonna think, and that really, really captured it for me in Chamber. So I feel weird like choosing the white cishet guy because I feel weird about that. I really, really feel that like there's a lot of more interesting stuff in the book. I feel like Monet, as you all have said, and we'll talk about the family drama later. I think they're more interesting. Like if you get deep into them. But personally, I still get driven towards that place of like I so get Jono. Like I get deeply where he's coming from and those kinds of doubts that he's having and why he can't relate to other people like fully. And I feel like that's an achievement because I usually don't get like attached at all to sad boys. Like like that's not my bit.
I know, same.
But yes. So yeah, and is there any particular story? I will go through because we got some comments, but I will go through them later after this question. But is there any particular story that all of you like, especially like, or would recommend reading, or like, or is close to your heart? Because you all have talked about the characters, but I'm interested also in the stories.
Particular stories. I mean, I might be like, I really just like the whole kind of Phalanx Covenant, how the team comes together and like forming and losing Blink and then still trying to figure out how to be like the new team group and like Massachusetts Academy, like after having gone through something so traumatic and just the way Banshee and Emma kind of come together. I think I love a good coming together story for the X-Men, and especially when it feels authentic and it's not like, oh, all these random characters are thrown together for any reason. It's like, no, you're seeing them come, you're seeing them grow, you're seeing them really bond. I've talked about it sometimes with the OC, but the New Teen Titans by George Perez and Marv Wolfman is like one of my all-time favorite comic runs, like of anything. And a huge part of that is because you see how the team grows and really bonds and comes together. And you get a lot of that in Generation X too, which is, I think, a huge testament to like why it's so big for a lot of people and why it stuck up with them. And that's that.
I feel like plot wise, Generation X doesn't have a lot of like really good or iconic plots. I think it's mostly the characters.
I was gonna say it.
Wake it up. Wake it up.
One of my favorite issues is the one where Monet and Jubilee have like a fight in the danger room because it's like really gay in my opinion, and it's just a very nice like conflict between the two characters. And it was one of the first issues I read because like I picked up the cover and I was like, this looks really gay, so I read it and I have a lot of fondness for that one.
No.
Solid reason.
Well, the whole run. No, no, for me.
175.
Yes. Honestly, I think the Monet family stuff, but because we'll probably address that later, I'll say the first three issues, that first arc of collecting the team, hitting the airport, getting Jonathan, Pennis being dropped off at their front steps, and then like the hunt for her. And though I love the artwork, it's something about that rain, like all of this happening in the rain. I just like that whole arc because I feel like that in itself, if we're gonna do a movie or animated series like that, and the Phalanx Covenant would be like a perfect 8 episode run. But I think that those first 3 issues to me are like perfect.
For me, and this might seem really weird and literally in the middle of nowhere, but it is the one storyline that has stuck with me from the first time I read it decades ago. And that is when we first meet Adrian Frost, and she essentially just shoves all the Generation X kids into the mental past to relive the death of the Hellions.
Yeah.
And to me, that was such a big moment for really showing Emma Frost and the progression and the growth that she has had throughout the series. And how that even though she has grown, even back then, she wasn't how they originally portrayed her, that she did have more heart, that she cared about these kids, despite the fact that she was a villain. And to me, I felt like that really added a lot of depth, and just it was cool to see.
Yeah, I agree that this doesn't have like whole like storyline plots. That's partially what I was asking this. So to see if anyone has any idea of any particular plots, but I agree it doesn't have them. But I really like the specials, like the annuals and all that stuff. I especially like the Dracula one, but that's because I'm a sucker for vampires, and also because it's chamber centered.
I get that all the time, like talking to Keenan, and I don't get it. He loves vampires. I'm like the only person that doesn't like vampires.
You need to get with it.
Yeah, I love vampires, and I really love like how they use. Yeah, I know how they use vampires in that issue, and how they use Dracula to like put all the spheres of Jono like to the maximum. And I really like this resolution, that issue. And yeah, that would be like I would say that if someone wants to enter this book, probably it's better to like read the first issues, as Rain says. But if you want to have like some fun, all the annuals for me feel like very self-contained, really beautiful stories. So that's my
Oh, I just want to go. Also, the Dracula issue annual was kind of gay. Like, it's very reminiscent of when Dracula tried to make Storm his bride, but instead of going after Storm, he's going after Chamber. And it has very gay vibes, which might just be the vampires, but very gay vibes.
I was gonna say vampires themselves are a little,
Yeah,
they're a little limp of the wrist.
Yeah.
It's funny how Generation X has that vampire story, and then later there's the one where Monet is fighting vampires, and then like after Generation X, Jubilee becomes a vampire.
Hey.
Yeah.
It's a gay book. It's very gay.
Vampires, gay. It's
the math is there. It's clear.
Right.
Very much.
Oh, so one of the comments that we got, because I'm gonna go through a little bit through the comments before moving on to the next thing, is if anyone has read or listened to the Generation X novel, which I have no idea about. But Gabriel is a novel person.
I read it so long ago. Also, because I read the Gen 13 books, because that's.
Oh, you got a copy.
There we go.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything about it, but I dug it. That's all I remember.
I read the first one a few years ago. It was like all the Generation X kids are like getting really sad for some reason, and then the villain is Despair. I think he's like a demon or something. It was not very good, but I mean, it had my Generation X faves, so it was like.
I feel like
You mean the punk emo goth team fought against the supervillain of clinical depression? I feel like that.
Isn't that Legion season 1? Like, what is that?
There was this one great
I thought
part.
you said LZ season 1. I was like, yeah.
There was this one great part where, like, I think Despair makes all the kids deal with their greatest fears, and Jubilee's greatest fear is just regular high school.
Oh,
I mean, I
That's
can
right.
get that though, to be
More.
honest.
that's
Yes.
sad.
That's a very reasonable fear. So, so also Travis left some comments, and I'm shout out to Travis because they couldn't be here, but they left some comments about like Travis said, "Skin is all my brothers and husk is all my sisters, but I feel Jubilee in my bones and just suspect zinc." And then yeah, and then saying that the vampire issue and Javel's nightmare, the issue about Javel's nightmare, which is like about like a horror movie. It's very fun because it has a panel that is literally a photo of a horror movie. I could never forget that. And those seem for Travis good for new readers. So yeah. So and Regina, who's also here, told that says that she was terrified of regular high school too. So that seems like a mood. Okay, so the next thing I want to ask you all before we get into the family story, I know the next after this one is the family story. So it's what do you all think Generation X did that no other book did before? We kind of had talked a little bit about this, but maybe span a little bit more. And maybe some other books haven't done, at least on Marvel.
So I actually have an answer for this. It's not necessarily like what Generation X did that was different that no one else had did, but one of the things, and Gabe, I know Husk is your girl, so you got to bear with me. I'm gonna drag her just a little bit right now, okay? One of the things I think they did great with Husk was artist Chris Bachalo. He never actually drew her naked. I think that the concept of Husk as a character kind of like is a little iffy sometimes. You had this 14-year-old girl who basically shed her skin and she ended up on the battlefield naked. And one of the things that they did in Generation X was they never actually showed that. Like anytime her Husk was off, like she still had her costume on. And it's like, yes, that's what you need, because once you start getting into that other stuff, it gets a little iffy. And I think that's probably why she's had some of the problems that she's had in the last few years, because it's like, how do you kind of fix that? But I think with fixing it, you just ignore it. She sheds the skin, but the costume's still there. And I think like that is one of the things that they did excellently with her, and why again she was able to kind of resonate with people, because you didn't really have to get into like this is kind of weirdness of it.
That is one thing that you mentioned and that I didn't even think about. So you said it. Like even like New Mutants was a great series, but they did have a lot of instances where the arts would sexualize these young girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember that ever happening in Generation X. They were allowed to be young, but they weren't, like you said, Paige was never like butt naked, even though theoretically, logically, there were multiple times when she could have been, should have been, but she wasn't. There was still sexualized art, but it was always geared towards Emma. And once more, this is just my memory, so by all means, sorry if I'm wrong. But I didn't feel like Jubilee or Husk or even Monet were actively sexualized by the art.
Agreed. Very much so. That was what it did for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when the girls would wear like crop tops or like stuff that teenage girls wear, it was never like presented in like a creepy way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also why I was like really surprised after reading Generation X when I read Peter David's X Factor, and Monet was like very sexy all the time. I was like, this is not what I remember.
Hey, yes.
She grew up.
No, quickly.
I think for me, this, for me personally, what this did was it made me not like find Jubilee annoying. I know that's your girl, but before this, like Jubilee always felt like nostalgia. Like that's pretty much all I ever really got from her. Was just 90s personified. And while this did come out during the 90s, it gave me more of like her personality. She was more than just the fireworks girl, that people kind of joke about only comes out during 4th of July. You actually see more of her powers and everything. And I love a Bob. So when she
Yes.
when she had her Bob, I was here for
Yes.
that. So I think like for me, it really like opened up my idea to not only Jubilee, but like some of the other characters who I kind of missed because I was so entrenched in like the X-Men and the older characters. But that doesn't mean I don't like any of the younger characters. I love like Young Justice and like any of those other kind of teenage characters. But the Generation X squad for me wasn't it. But like getting into this, I'm like, all right, they're not that bad. I see it.
Well, I think that Generation X did a really good job at being more real. And when I say that, what I mean is, um, now in 2021, we have certain labels that you can ascribe to certain people that makes a lot more sense. Be it trans, be it cis, be it Latinx or whatnot. And a lot of the conversations have evolved over time. And I feel like Generation X benefits from the X-Men having come about in the 60s and been this stand-in for like civil rights and whatnot, but being 5 white people. But then you move a little bit forward, and then you have the New Mutants that come around. They have a little bit more diversity, but like you said, some of the imagery may be a bit more sexualized. A lot of it they're still stuck in a certain time period where visually things have moved forward, and then like depending on the creative team, sure, but then us collectively in the real world have gone through the 90s through like HBCUs and grunge music and learning about being queer and being trans. Like there were several documentaries popping up about Paris is Burning, like that in itself. So what I think Generation X benefits from is coming like right at the right time, having that foundation of these two super teams that came before them, but then hitting right when like technology was getting bigger, where you were getting these computers in homes, you were getting an explosion of different types of music. Um, you got a lot of films that even though some of them were like very white savior, like Dangerous Minds, you still got this like explosion of pop culture that I think they came right at the right time, so that even 20 years later, if a lot of their plots and stories were just aesthetics and moods, they don't have their own Phoenix saga. I think they still are in this pocket where they felt a bit more grounded. Because even not to get ahead, but even with Monet and her family stuff, looking at that versus like the Scott family, time hopping, time dimensional, Hope, Rachel, all that, like like her family issues, take out the mutant part. Let's just say her brother was a gangbanger. It all reads as real, like as like real world stuff. So I think they were a bit more grounded than other series before, and that could have probably been to their detriment as well. But that's what I think Generation X had that other X teams before it didn't have.
I think you also touched on something too with like them being something hitting at the right time with like their aesthetic and everything. And like this is an entire team of like everybody is different, right? Like everybody is completely not like a random white character. And they put them on the forefront, and they lasted for 75 issues. The 05 got canceled like 50.
Listen, that's
okay.
So I complain a lot, like, oh, Generation X is a TV show and a movie, this and that. But I keep having to remind myself there are so many other people who love teams that come after and have not gotten 75 issues and annuals and tie-ins with Gen 13 and horrible movie pilot. Like, there's so many.
Bad.
I love it. And then even to your point, Casey, I'm sorry, Casey.
LZ?
I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah.
But to your point, even with Paige being the like conventionally attractive blonde hair, blue eyed white woman, she had a host of other things. Like that was her casing. Like literally, she could rip off that casing, but she had so many other things going on that the whiteness that her and Jonathan like lived in was to me secondary versus like original X-Men where all 5 of them were just like white passing attractive kids. So hey,
the two white children were the biggest hot messes on that whole team. Like they just were just therapy they needed. The whole series.
Yeah.
And it does help that they have like their powers like disfigure them in some way. It's like they don't really benefit from like the pretty privilege Jean or Iceman has.
Now, see why Iceman got to be in it.
Sure. Get him.
There's definitely
Yeah.
a couple of mutants
I
who've
love
been
him.
being carried by being pretty.
No, say that.
Say that.
Shoot, they blew up the girl's door when they were left to get, but you know, like them two together, just like, but yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, so being back on what you all said, I also feel like there's a lot of like intention in a lot of these things, because like I don't know why, but this book feels one of the most of the books that have more work behind the character design of all the X-Men books, because they feel like very, very intentionally made to, like, for example, to see like Penance looks or Emblade or like those things are like done to convey certain emotions. They are done to like, and I feel like from the way they dress, from the way they design this comic that is more like gothic and etc. From everything, I feel like they were pretty much trying to make a book that feel like that give a lot of design work to these characters, and I feel made it very, very third dimensional, very like grounded, as you all said, very like real life. Like they could feel like real people, even if they were like disfigured mutants that have like all these things going on. And yeah, and I agree with the things you all said, and it's curious to me because like it pretty much feels like a thing of the book, because it's not something that these creatives, like thinking of Scott Lobdell and Chris Bachalo, it's not something that they haven't done in other books, because other books they have sexualized people that were not like those failures have happened in other places, but not in Generation X. And that's pretty much feels like an effort to make this book serious in a way that made the characters depth, and that has given us why we love it so much, why we get around so people to talk about it. So yeah.
I feel like this series could have easily become a kumbaya, let's sit around and talk about how sad we are kind of series, which is
Like
not
the novel.
That's not my thing. I don't really care for that. I like to see characters kind of grow from their trials and tribulations and make their own decisions and kind of be the ones to drive their own story. So for this, I really appreciated it. That's what we got from these characters, because like I said, you could easily get a team of like, I don't know, some Morlocks or something, and then it would just be a story of them being sad and being underground, and or then it would just be them like being like hokey and having a bunch of fun or something like that, and you wouldn't get too much story. But so I appreciate that they gave this kind of some weight to it and some actual care, and it wasn't just like them sitting around a campfire.
Which they've done.
Although we like that, because like when Exodus is around a campfire talking about Scarlet Witch, we like that. So
well, that's just because you like Exodus. That doesn't count.
So yeah, if you want to talk the family drama, we can start.
Oh, the family drama. Though I will say, so Rain, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Being
please.
as how you're a huge Monet fan, how do
Absolutely.
you feel about her now being able to switch back and forth between the penance forms, and B, the twins also apparently being able to do that, as we saw earlier in the Krakoan era for the issue.
Now, was it just that one panel? Because they play in the Saint Croix family.
They are.
I actually like it, but I have so many complicated feelings about the way that family is portrayed and has been even through Generation X that it burns me up. But I actually am okay with that, because I feel like when you have a family, and there again is this time hopping, time displaced kids who are older than the adults, the parents and whatnot. There comes some point in which you have to just take what's there and make it work. So her having that penance form for me never bothered me. Giving it to Nicole and Claudette is fine, but I don't like it if you're not going to do anything with it. Like to show it just to say, hey, they can do what their sisters do. But so on the one hand, okay, it's cute, thanks, but like I don't want
I feel like the penance form is important to the family. I feel like it's a part of the family dysfunction. Like obviously, like Marius kind of put them in it. They do whatever because you know they feel like they can't replace Monet. And how she even says she feels trapped in it, or how she's scared of it later on in the pad run. And then knowing that M-Play is on the island also, even though we haven't really seen him outside of that data page, it's just like knowing all of these things are happening. It's so interesting that we haven't gotten deeper into that family drama and that dysfunction because it's right there in front of you.
X-Men is family drama and always has been. Like two gay lovers have fighting with their kids, you know, Magneto and Charles. So like I hate that. And so to answer your question, I'm fine with the form. The twins having it, I'm kind of iffy about, but if you're going to flesh it out, then sure. You know, show me what you're going to do with it. But I don't want them to be just identical carbon copies of Monet. Like they have their own power set. Explore that. So
do you think you'd ever be okay with the spot of like them being okay with M-Play Marius, like being
I want
happy,
that.
funny? Oh, you
I
do?
absolutely want that. Yes, absolutely. I want that. Like everyone else has had chance to rectify and come to some, you know, come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, with their family and time displaced kids and stuff. Like, why isn't this family given the space? Because I absolutely hate the way Monet was written in that instance, that M-Play took her to that other realm. Like when they had her like laughing at him and yeah, just I just didn't like it. I didn't like it.
Okay.
At
So-
first, can I?
You can go ahead.
Okay. At first, when Monet was revealed to be able to shapeshift into the penance form, I didn't like that because I was like, well, like that is the form that like she associates with like trauma, and like why would she be okay with that? But then I thought like maybe that shapeshifting power is sort of representative of like how trauma never really leaves you, and you just have to learn to live with it and make it work for you. So if it's like that, then I like it better, I think.
So I, like you, I was also not a fan. The first time I saw it, it was very much a why, what the fuck is happening, and then we don't get any explanation, and it irked me. Still does a little bit, obviously. But when I was doing the reread, there is a scene in the beginning of Generation X where Penance just like seizes out and passes out, and no one knows why, and they're able to get Moira on the phone, and pretty much what she says is that Penance is withdrawing so much that it is causing her skin to harden more and was causing her muscles to entropy. And I think that that concept, that it is a form that she takes when she's withdrawing in on herself, would be an extremely interesting avenue to pursue, especially since in X Corp, she's taking on this form when she is acting independently and on her own and becoming violent. And I can see how that is, in a way, her drawing in on herself and manifesting her trauma. And I think that if the writers would take it that route, I think it would be incredible. And it would also, to me, it would also make sense, having gone through similar trauma, why the twins would be able to manifest it in the same way.
Yeah, yeah, they lived that trauma for like 60 issues. Yeah, so yeah.
And so, you know, Gabe, let me ask you then also, because, you know, while Monet has probably the most prevalent family drama that we all know about, the Guthries have their own little like issues going on, you know, those kids over there. And so I'm an Icarus fan.
I was going to say Icarus deserves.
I think he is like the top of the Guthrie line, you know. So I'm always excited for him. Arrow obviously had like a humongous showing during the Krakoa era and the X-Men issue when she was in the Crucible. Like
easily one of like the best issues of the
like hands down.
So, and you know, and I even think about that. You have her in the Crucible fighting with Apocalypse, and you see in the stands like Husk and Cannonball kind of jumping out at them. We've seen them in the AOA. Is that a family that you kind of want to see explored a little bit more? Are you into the fact that like they're all mutants? Or
yes, there needs to be more Guthrie, and I could rant for like hours about the Guthrie family and the potential that it has. Both in the pure power of the family, you have Sam Cannonball, who is essentially invincible. who died and came back to life, but we don't talk about that anymore. We have Icarus, who is literally invincible unless he's a dumbass and cuts off his own wings. We have Husk, who in her very first appearance, which we also don't talk about, she turned into a bird. She husked off her skin, and she was a bird. But we also don't talk about that. We have the little one, Jebediah, who has like unlimited electricity and behind his eye. Yeah. And we have Arrow, who flies, but she's a badass, so we'll forgive that. Yeah. And there's just so much potential in that family and power and personality. I would kill for that to be addressed on panel.
I mean, they were who was being studied after the decimation. Like,
yep.
Yeah.
And why not?
And that was like the only time that family got, I think, the recognition for how weird it is that this one woman, Lusunda, popped out like 20 mutant babies.
Tina knows.
Like, forget Xavier. Lucinda should be running the X-Men. Half of them are her children. So yes, absolutely, I want the Guthries to get more focus and to play more on that dynamics that they have, and the conflicting personalities they have with how like Paige is so rigid and uptight, and then you had Jay, who was such a free spirit, and everything in between. I mean, one of them was part of one of the Guthrie kids was part of an anti-mutant hate group for a moment, and like there's just so much potential in that family.
Damn, it's a lot of them.
They've got the other sister too, who was in Age of Apocalypse, and I don't think she's actually manifested her mutant powers yet. In like
Not that we've seen.
Give it
but
time.
It's just like they're here. They're here.
That's her own book.
Give the Guthries a book. I don't care what you call it. Just I want that.
This is the third time you have said this in the show.
And then you also have Cannonball's wife and kid. I mean, the kid who's a baby and they've already said has manifested powers. Come on, like, give me a Guthrie book.
They haven't even like met Sam's kids yet, have they?
Not on panel. Not that I know of.
That's crazy.
I kind of glazed over at the ending. I don't think anyone has.
They should give you a Guthrie book. Just look like it.
Just give me a Guthrie book where it's all the Guthries and Izzy and kooky Uncle Roberto. Like, I'm all about it. Please.
We love Sunspot.
I buy it.
Yeah, same.
So going back to Monet and
you said family drama. You never said pro family drama. You're still on topic.
The issues I have liked more this reread that I have done, that I haven't reread the whole thing. I have only reread until like 50 or 51 when it started being written by people that I don't want to read anymore. So when I reread it, I was like surprised by how emotionally deep the Larry Hama issues were, in which they start with all this thing that is about kind of Alice in Wonderland and like going to like all these fairy tale places, and like it's kind of a metaphorical exploration of the trauma of the family, kind of trying to get you into it little by little. And then what happens with Gaia, and the whole we're gonna be all together in one form or something like that. That's how is the name? M-plate? I don't know how is the name of the fusion of everyone, but yeah. So
the also creative name of M-plate for M-plate and M coming together.
M-plate wants to like melt everyone into one thing, and when I was reading that this time, I was like, this is actually kind of like pretty. I mean, you have to take the metaphorical out of it. You have to like take the layers, but it's kind of someone being very like controlling of their environment, like wishing they could control the things that harm them. And it kind of explains Marius' stuff into like some sort of trauma himself. I feel like sometimes it falls too much into hard people arguments, but also it's pretty interesting, and it develops into this whole thing with like actually Monet was the two twins, and you all know that, and probably the people that are listening also know that. And I want to ask you all what you think of this, this saga of like them revealing all this stuff in those weird ways, and how you feel, because I feel like it's really, really emotionally depth, even if sometimes it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think from what I know, I think like that pivot for Generation X into like being really like weird was very disliked by the fans, but I also like
I wondered
how it
that.
explores. Hmm?
I said I wondered that when it started to get a little weird. I was like, oh, do fans like this?
Yeah, I liked how it like explores the Saint Croix drama, like you said. Um and I think the weirdness is honestly like a good fit for Generation X. Like it feels almost in a way like a successor to like Excalibur, how like that series was so weird and just like just not afraid to do like just kind of really absurd things with the characters.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So yes, I like the weird. If I'm understanding your question, because I'm sorry, I was so wrapped up into what was said. I think with the hurt people, and the trauma and trying to control things, um, I think that the Saint Croix family is just the best family. Um, I think they add to that weirdness, because it's one thing to have now weird storylines and we're out of space and we're at this amalgam temple where Gaia has to be sacrificed and all that. Like that's sure external weirdness, but then you have on the heels of that or right before it, you have Monet and her family drama and all of this stuff coming out, like that explosion that happened in what was it, issue 50, that like set off this like chain of events where now everything is weird from there on out. Like we're no longer these same kids. This girl is no longer, she's two people. These two headmasters, the one who's like a father on his own, but like all intents and purposes, a cop and a teacher. And then this like psychic ex-villain, now anti-hero headmaster has to figure this out. Like they are really honestly not equipped to deal with all of the drama and weirdness.
Yeah.
Because, like, has Banshee ever been in the cosmic stories with the X Men? I can't recall him being out in space. So I'm like,
Uh,
this is such a weird. Like, everybody was just out of sorts, and so I think that the Monet, the Saint Croix family, like reveal was like also shifting the tide of the story of the book in like in what ways that they were going to go, because even when they got to the school aspect, it still was so different having humans at school versus where we started with just seven of us, so
Yeah.
or six of us and Mondo, and they had Franklin Richards as their ward at one point in time. Like
Yeah.
you don't get no more
Yes.
weird than that. So
just
like
Franklin Richards living in a treehouse in their danger room. It's no
with
big
Artie
deal.
Leach, like Artie Leach,
Kicking it with Artie.
yeah, like and Mondo too, like yeah. So
Except
yeah.
it was never Mondo to begin with. It was always a literal houseplant.
Even
The whole
that, it's like, is this M all over again? Like,
I was about to say they never wanted them to be like who they actually were. It was like you always somebody else wrapped up as somebody else.
I was not a huge fan of when it took that one. It confused me as a kid, and while I think I understand it now, I'm afraid to go back and reread it, only to find out that I still don't understand it. When like everyone just fused and came together. But in the same note, I do have to like it because to me, Gaia is the most underappreciated and underrated character in this whole comic. Girl has
Yes.
massive power, and then she goes off to be the world's greatest hero, and we literally never hear of her again. Like no one even says her name.
yo,
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get to that part in my reread, but like how was she written out of the book? Like what did she
They
do?
had a crossover with Nate Gray in X-Men,
Mm.
and just the amount of power that Nate had and the amount of power that Gaia had, she kind of came to this decision that she needed to find her own way as a hero and use her power to do something good. So she leaves Generation X, and I think we get one mention of her. And that's it. Like, just a general mention of Jubilee, like, wondering, like, hey, Gaia's been gone long enough now. Maybe I can make a move on Cinch. And that's it. Like, no one, to this day, no one ever questions where the girl who could make matter out of nothing has been all this time.
I hate that.
I hope she's
Yeah.
on Krakoa.
She's
Gaia
somewhere.
had the potential. I always feel like in this reread, I also feel like Gaia had the potential of being my favorite character if she was actually written that much. Because like she has like the best lines, but they're like 2 lines per issue maximum. So,
Oh, they failed her. Lord.
yeah.
And she had the pink hair when Pink was like, so
Yeah.
I loved Guy. I was like, man, how do you have these powerhouse characters? This is when people like talk down on this run. I'm like, do you not see the potential that is like on panel? Not even like what could have been. Like Gaia's entire first like arc with them was like this god. She was essentially a god. Like, I don't know.
She built a
Use
house
your
out
Gaia.
of nothing. Just like, bam, a house that defied the laws of gravity, just chilling.
The house is pretty nice. I like
Right.
it. I like his design work.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, so it gave me Gaia, so I have to like the weird magical
Mm-hmm.
Amaglam temple.
One thing about M-Plate, like the amalgamation of all of the siblings is I feel like because that character is like androgynous or like the nobody's really sure of their gender, and I feel like that's the closest that Generation X gets to like any sort of queer representation, and I feel like that is kind of a failing on its part. Like I think that book could have done more for representing like gay or trans characters or even like hinting at it. And like if you looked at the letters, like there were people writing in saying like, are any of the Generation X characters gay? And I think one of the editor replies was like or like someone asked like, is it going to introduce a gay character? Their reply was like, well, how do you know that one of them isn't gay? But like they never really deliver on that, and I think they could have done more with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the character is described explicitly as androgynous in the book. Like it says they're androgynous. Someone says it. So I feel like they were trying to do something, but I'm kind of glad it wasn't M that played the queer representation.
Yeah. Ugh, that was a waste. I thought for a time there was when Jonathan and Angelo was like on the run or like on that cross country whatever they were doing. And it may be me just misremembering, but as a kid I was like, oh yeah, they're boyfriends. Like they have something. And so I go ahead.
No, what I was just gonna say is I reread the beginning issues, and one thing I noticed is that Jonathan calls both Paige and Angelo Sunshine a lot.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is kind of gay. How did I not notice this as a kid?
Look, I'm saying a lot of it was, and I'll say subtext, but not even really. Like I was a queer kid, so there were a lot of things that for me just made sense. I was like, oh yeah, they're something, even if they're not explicitly holding hands. Like, and I was never like, oh, but he likes Paige. That was never a deal. I was like, yeah, but they clearly like each other, and so I read a lot of queerness into it, but I'm sure a lot was projecting because back then in the 90s there was stereotypes. There were the sassy gay friend, there was the funny drag queen. There was not in-depth serious, even in a comedy, like serious unions with queer men. So
I will say that if they were to retroactively make Skin queer, it would solve a lot of the issues I have with that character, which I'm sure we'll get to later. And how that character was presented on page. If he was queer, it would fix a lot of that.
Now I'm interested in that. Like, please elaborate.
Yeah,
Um,
please
so-
elaborate.
So I have an issue with Skin. Skin is the first Puerto Rican I think we ever see in the X-Men, because there's only like 4 of them. And maybe this is just me and my experiences being a Puerto Rican growing up in New York City, but the fact that with a book that is so diverse and it feels like it makes sure not to hit the stereotypes when it comes to Sync and when it comes to Monet, but then you have Skin, who is his entire backstory is how he ran with gangs.
Yes.
And anytime we get in his head, it's about how life is now compared to how when he was dodging drive-by shootings. And it is such a barely even two-dimensional way to represent something that doesn't have many representation in the X-Men. There's not many Latinx X-Men, and there's definitely not many Puerto Rican X-Men. And the fact that they finally had one and they did it that way,
Mm-hmm.
it was a huge failure.
Absolutely.
And I didn't get up to my reread, but kind of bring it back to family drama. Skin's family drama is literally just gang warfare.
Yeah,
Like,
and
you have Torres, who I believe was his sister, and it's just he faked his death to get away from his gang and his family, and that is Skin's entire backstory. So I think that if he was to be retroactively, he was queer this whole time. I think that it does add a dimension that kind of takes it away from that stereotype, and it plays with that stereotype in a very interesting way, because there's always that kind of background of machismo with Skin's character of how a man is. And if he was gay the whole time and they just never was relevant to the plot, I would feel a lot better about how that was in retrospect.
It's always interesting how like a potential retcon of something can like really start to make past stories make more sense, or like kind of clean them up for you a little bit. I think a big one is obviously Moira being like a mutant. And when you go back and you read older X-Men stories now, and certain things that she might say that you might have had an issue with in the past, you kind of say it's like, oh, well, now in this new context of the story, it makes sense. Again, Iceman was another one where he was queer coded for the longest time. And then when he finally came out, a lot of those stories that we saw of him in the past of like not being able to reach his full potential or just kind of feeling insecure in his place, it makes sense now. So I totally understand what you're saying about Skin. Maybe that's what he needs.
I think so.
Yeah,
I
I
think
never really read Skin in that way, but you guys are giving a good argument for it.
Yeah. And
I-
I like how I like how the idea of them playing also on Skin and Chamber having some kind of relationship, because that would also make Chamber less like, I don't know, I
Boring
hate that the
cishet white man.
Yeah. And also like I hate the Romeo and Juliet dynamic of Chamber and Husk. Even if I acknowledge that relationship is really important for both of their arcs, I kind of wish it wasn't that big of a Romeo and Juliet part, and having some other love interest around makes it less of that and more of just these people like being dramatic.
Paige and Jono is very much original, like from the very beginning, Scott and Jean, with the
Absolutely.
internal monologue of, oh, he can never know, oh, she can never know.
Yeah.
And it's not done as beaten to the ground as it was in the original issues of
Damn.
X-Men, because that is painful. But it's the same concept, and I agree, like, it got old really fast. Even though I love Jono and I love Paige and I want them together, but it got a little bit old.
Absolutely.
That dynamic would be more fun, I think, if Paige was like, "Oh, now does Angelo like Chamber? Like, what do I do?" That would make it a little more fresh and interesting.
Especially since in the very beginning, Skin and Paige had like this like weird flirtation, like you could never get me type deal. Where Skin just kept hitting on Paige, and she's like, in your dreams.
So they can all be together.
We got Polly.
That's what
Let's
I
have a
hear.
canon couple. Let's do it.
I love it. I'm here for it.
Seems to be the
Yeah,
way to go.
that's way better than the Romeo and Juliet stuff.
But also maybe not, because how old is Skin? Like, isn't he like fresh out of high school when he died?
I think so.
First time?
I know Jono was 18. I think Paige was 16-ish or 15, but I don't remember about Skin.
I thought
Skin
everybody was
was
16.
16 in the beginning of the comic, and then like Jono graduates and Skin gets crucified. So I don't know how old
Yeah.
he is supposed to be now. So maybe not a relationship anymore.
Damn, that's
Damn,
weird.
that's fucking stuff up.
Exactly. I actually have a question with family dynamics for everyone, and that is the Frost family dynamics and
Ooh.
how and the role that played in Generation X and what you guys thought about that.
Trauma.
I do love
Now,
Emma Frost shooting her sister in the head with a gun. Like I think that run of Generation X I didn't like as much, but that moment was great, I think.
I
Uh,
think no. Go ahead,
this
Ring. So
no, but I dominate. I don't want to go ahead.
no, I think the Frost family dynamic is interesting because I feel like it's one we don't really see too much of. We just kind of like, or at least we really only get it from like Emma's point of view. And from Emma's point of view, everybody else is wrong. But I'm pretty sure, like, when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, of Cordelia, maybe not Christian. Obviously, she brought him a cocoa, so like they're like tight.
right,
But when you
right.
get down into Adrian and Cordelia, I'm pretty sure they got some issues. I wouldn't mind their sisters coming back and kind of shaking Emma up a little bit. She needs it.
She needs it. She's having her girl boss moment right now, and I'm not really
Hey.
feeling it. So it's time to shake some things up. And I agree. I think the Frost family dynamic is interesting to say the least. But like Keenan said, that we've kind of always only experienced it from Emma's point of view instead of everyone else's. And you know, Emma likes to change the narrative.
Yes. Yes.
You
A
know,
little bit.
this series actually was really reminded me just how often she does not care about like, you know, the
Consent.
unwritten rule of being a telepath that you don't enter anyone's mind or whatever without any kind of consent. Child, she don't care. She's gonna do it. She's gonna do whatever she wants to do. And I forgot how often like she does not care about that. Although that does show you like the difference between like her and Jean, because Jean do it too. She just don't tell you.
Yay.
Get her.
Yay.
Get her, Jay. Get her. No, I think the Frost. I think that's one place that the series failed. Is with Frost, and honestly, Banshee's family as well. Because Frost, Massachusetts Academy, and the wealth that she accumulated, and then her childhood trauma with her family, it it's like the kids were pawns in their twisted family game dynamic, whatever. Because wasn't Cordelia and Mondo together, like in like the first couple issues or
Cord-
something?
Cordelia was 17 in Generation X, which they completely forgot about with Emma's back. I think she's older now than Emma, which makes no sense.
Oh,
But yeah, she like seduced Mondo to try to get a seat in the
see,
Hellfire Club.
and that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like this essentially becomes like Game of Thrones with this family, but the kids are the pawns. And I'm like, and though it's terrible, I like it because it's a very different dynamic than go fight Magneto because he's killing humans. Like it's very much like we got to figure out what's going on. But this person who is our parent for all intents and purposes, like their own trauma is affecting us negatively, and like really only Monet is speaking up. I wish they had a fleshed out the Frost family a bit more, even the Massachusetts Academy and Emma and her wealth, because coming into this I didn't know anything about a Hellion. I didn't know nothing. I knew that she had a
Oh, you missed her flops before this.
hey,
Okay.
I'm going back, I'm revisiting very intentionally, but I was like, I didn't know that she like had kids that died until
Yes,
like I
she
started getting
flopped
into the
a whole
phalanx.
time before this and then got to this.
Look, and I'm like, what about? So I think Generation X is one cog in the many acquisitions of the Frost, and not even just Emma, just that family at large. And they, even though they under Emma, I think that this book really failed by not giving us more of Emma and of Banshee's family, because we got Cassidy Keep and we got the sisters, yeah, but I think there just could have been a bit more because they're
I
all
know
evil.
that you refer to it as Game of Thrones, but like mutant school children. But now I want that book, like
Hey,
intentionally.
hey.
I want the Frost siblings to just go full Game of Thrones, all four of them.
Yeah, yeah. I found an image of like their family tree, and I'm like stuck in my head like '90s like black family movies where it's a wedding or a funeral, and I want those Frost kids to go back home for a funeral and have to deal with their own shit in this house with other family. Like all these mutants have to like behave and be human for this terrible event and like forced to deal with their shit like from the years that they've been created. Like I want that. Be it a limited
I shade
series.
Emma, but if that was an annual, I'd read that.
That's something you
You
see,
get
like
into it. You get
I
into
would.
it.
I may shade her a few times here and there, but if it wasn't like an annual getting to her family and everything like that, and really got into like the Frost and broke that down more, I would definitely be here for that because somebody got to check her, and nobody can check you like family.
Okay.
So before we move to the last question, I I want to ask a couple of things. Well, first a comment by Regina asking Rain. I needed to do this. If he hears Monet with a French accent or not.
No, actually, I don't. I think for as worldly as she is, I think it's more like a Spanglish thing where you're jumping between dialects. So for me, I hear her, honestly, before all of her mess, as Stacy Dash from Clueless, because I was a kid, that was my reference point. So I hear her as this like kind of bougie valley
Valley
girl,
girl.
but with a bunch of like $10 words and jumping between like a Moroccan accent to a French to I think she can move seamlessly between all of her dialects but speak English. So I don't hear just French, but I hear like just a combination of
Like an accent
different
she made
accents.
up. Like
I mean, yes, yeah, based off of all of the languages she already knows. So yeah, I think I just hear yeah. But no, I don't hear French exclusively. But yeah.
You can't expect Monet to speak in the same accent that some commoner might. Come on. She needs her own accent.
Aristocratian, yeah. But I don't even hear Implate. Like, though I know he has the respirator, for some reason, I hear him with like a thick, um, I'm American, so forgive me, but like a thick, maybe, the black African people who are in England, how they have that African
Yeah.
accent and they have that British. That's what I hear from him when I'm reading, because I feel like in his human form, he looks very much black. He looks black, more black than Monet has ever
I was
looked.
gonna say he looked more black than his sisters.
Hey, look. So yeah.
I'm such a nerd because I hear Darth Vader with the mask over his face.
I was gonna say I hear like something like raspy and like breathy, like a little respirator, some type.
I love that Rain hears British because it's like he's evil, so he must sound British. But yeah, and the other question I had is for Seal, is Lesbian Jubilee, and I want to ask you about that because we have been talking about Generation X, and that's your handle literally, and I want to hear your case because, like, if you are comfortable with hearing your case, because that's a deviation for the team, but I pretty much wanted to hear your case since the first day that we got you in, but we couldn't talk about Lesbian Jubilee in so at styles.
Yeah. Well, I think even in Generation X, I think Jubilee's friendships with other girls and just like her empathy toward other girls in particular is really you see it a lot. Like she's very kind to Penance. Like she tries to like be her friend, and like on some level it's a bit like patronizing. Like I think Jubilee like wants to be like a sort of she wants to be like a big sister figure to her, so she's a bit like patronizing at some points, but like she is like she's pretty much like Penance's only friend outside of Jono, who we don't see her with that often. So like there's that, and then there's her rivalry with Monet, like before Monet is revealed to be the twins, but like even after, and then like Monet like is freed of Penance. It's I think that relationship is very it's like it's not like the Claremont thing where like he intends it to be gay, but it's just like obsessed with each other at points, and it's like I do see their like mutual crush on Everett as a sort of like it's just like a sort of way for them to like get at their feelings for each other to some extent, I think. And then I think there's that one point where Jubilee is kidnapped by Bastian, I think. And then there's like Bastian has this younger girl as an assistant. I think her name is like Daria or something. And then Jubilee has I think she like convinces her to rescue her, or like maybe she rescues Daria or something. But like even that connection with another girl is like it shows that Jubilee, I think a lot of I mean it feels kind of weird to say that like her relationships with girls are very significant, because like obviously she's most known for like her dynamic with Wolverine, but like outside of that, I think her strongest relationships are with women. And then like even Wolverine is like obviously not like a romantic or a sexual thing. It's like it's like a mentor or father figure. So yeah, I just think that Jubilee's dynamics with girls and women is significant.
Now, I won't. Jubilee's not my favorite, but I always say I respect the doll because Bessie is my favorite character, and Jubilee holds my girl down when she. So, like, I'm always gonna be here to like support Jubilee in whatever she does, as long as she's still holding my girl down. So
Oh
You
no!
know, coming into this, it has not been any surprise that like I am not a Jubilee fan. But I will say that like not only has Generation X kind of make me a little bit more into her, I guess I should say, or like come back from it. If she were a lesbian, I'd be here for it. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like hearing you talk about this right now, and like I've been there mostly on the X-Men side compared to like the Generation X stuff, so I'm mostly dealing with the adults. So when Jubilee was there, she was kind of like the annoying kind of kid there with Wolverine, but I could see the relationship that you were talking about where it's never been anything romantic. It's mostly been like a mentorship kind of thing. And, you know, even later on with her becoming a mom, like she don't need a man. Like I think she would be fine. I think that she'd be great with like another woman.
And I also
think you woke it up. I like this. I'm on your side now.
It's significant that she didn't have a friend for like a long period of time. Yeah. Like she liked Sync, but it was always sort of unreciprocated, and that really reminded me of like when I was like in high school or middle school, and like I liked boys, but I didn't really like.
I had crushes on girls all the time. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that means
high school.
You pick. You say, "This is the one I'm gonna like. I'm gonna do this."
Right.
This is my role now. I must act the play.
Of course, she would like Everett, because like Everett is like the sweetest guy that like anyone has ever met. So I mean,
everybody
I think
likes
that
a nice black boy.
Yeah.
Especially when he got a crush on the other girl. You always go after the ones who you know don't like you. So that
exactly.
you also go after the person who's crushing on the person you're crushing on.
Yes, so she is queer. I think she.
All right. I think lesbian Jubilee is happening, people.
I think
it's here.
Bring her
The
in.
vibe is here.
Okay, I'm glad I've convinced all of you.
Good job.
Aside from lesbian Jubilee, I have a question. What are your guys' thoughts on that brief Chamber Jubilee relationship that happened in the last Generation X?
Didn't like it.
I
I
don't
didn't
think
want
about it.
Okay,
No.
I'm not alone. I hate it
'Cause
so
was-
much.
No,
Yeah.
we don't
It
think
was
about
forced.
I
It was
like it as a
forced.
friendship.
Yes.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
like
I-
them a lot as a friendship. And I can understand friends like kissing the scarf of other friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in the
Exactly.
original Generation X, I saw Chamber as more of like a big brother figure to her, and like that age difference was always very prominent in my mind. So I was like surprised when made it into a romance, and I was not really a fan, but I'm glad that they seem to have maybe dropped that.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
I
it,
mean-
it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when one of them seemingly dies for a year and the other one dies for an unknown amount of time, it's a good way to come back fresh.
Hey,
How
a
the
hard
hell is
reboot.
Shogo still a baby?
Magic.
Well,
Dragons.
Keenan, did you want to tell us about
Off that one. Can't tell you about that one. No doubt.
Yo. Yeah. No, I hated it though. I didn't like it. It was a point. I think it undid a lot of what was already established, and I'm all for going new in different ways. But to me, it felt forced. It's like, oh, these are the two characters we have to play with for the second run. But like they could have been the Emma and Banshee of this run, and not the love. Like we didn't need that.
Well,
Mhm.
Emma and Banshee in Generation X did have a lot of
Oh yeah.
tension.
Hey.
But yeah, it definitely felt like, hey, this is about Jubilee, and Chamber's the only dude from Generation X alive. So let's make it happen.
I hated it. Just create a new. Oh, where was Maggot? He wasn't doing nothing. He could if you're gonna try to make something work.
Maggot was kind of dead. I don't know when Maggot came back to life, but he was also kind of dead. They were all dead.
Yeah. It supports the lesbian theory. He's
There we
the
go.
only one
I
alive.
will no longer accept anything but lesbian Jubilee.
I
going
mean,
forward.
Hey.
So,
The lesbian theory makes it make more sense because, like you said, it's like
Absolutely.
I must like the only guy left from my high school.
And she
Graduate.
can't kiss him.
Right, really? Too. Oh, perfect. Yes, she's a lesbian.
exactly, and we know why she couldn't kiss him.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oops.
Drats.
Oh, man, right. Oh, I love you for you. No, he's her beard.
Mhm.
We all went through our phase with our beards. We all had it.
Okay, yeah, me and her went to prom.
Okay.
Prom, girlfriend, all that.
Hey.
Told my mama.
Oh wait. Oh wait. Man. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question is what do you all think the legacy of Generation X 1994 is, and also about the new run, the one we just been talking about. More like, would you all like to do a show about it or not, or do you like it or whatever? But brief, because there's a whole thing there.
You mean the
But
new
yeah.
one, like the most recent one when
With Strain?
Yep.
Yeah, with Christina Strain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember seeing some people like that. But as far as like back to the question anyway, but for me in Generation X, I'd be down to read enjoying you guys to talk about the the follow-up. I did check out and never read it before because, like I said, it's Jubilee. I'm sorry. But but I will say that like I remember hearing great things about that updated run, and I do really like that this team is like the different kids or whatever, and it's not like that is what they're there to be, if that makes sense. They aren't just their exterior, and they aren't just their like traumas. Sure, they have them and you're going to learn all about them, but I do appreciate that Generation X is like the outsiders of the outsiders, but that's not what they're being sold as. if that makes sense. They're all each their own individual people. So one thing I have definitely gone on record and saying is I've never been a fan of like changing something for the sake of changing something, except if it makes completely narrative sense. And I feel like for them, like you don't even really need to change too much for them because they just are who they are. Except lesbian Jubilee, we could change that.
Lesbian Jubilee and gay
That don't
skin.
count.
Yes, yes.
Gay skins, yeah.
Just make them all gayer, and it's an improvement.
Do you
Just turn it up just a
remember
little bit.
how Angelo actually had a crush on Jubilee like right before he died?
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, that makes sense with lesbian Jubilee and gay
I
Angelo.
think that's why. I think in a way the case could be made that that's why he's dead, because he followed Jubilee to L.A. and then the two of them got scooped up and crucified, and only Jubilee got saved. So,
yeah.
Well,
Jesse Bedlam was also on that long crucified.
Yep.
oh, he was. You don't miss a chance to bring up Bedlam.
Lord.
Don't miss a chance.
But no, taking it back to Gen X. So I'm actually one of the people. I was a fan of that successor title by Christina Strain. I thought that it really captured the essence of the original Generation X, which was having the outsiders of the outsiders, the weirder kids, kind of like giving them that deep personal conflict and like really getting to the characters of them. I do think it was a little too weird to survive its time when it came out, but seeing them again or like seeing it come back in some type of way, I think that'll always be the legacy of Generation X itself, is making it be the outsiders of the outsiders and keeping them deep. And that's how you kind of keep that brand going along. And they're mutants. You'll always be able to find the outsiders amongst the outsiders.
Hard agree. I enjoyed it. I also think that it is a victim of its time. I liked it when I read it and it was interesting. I felt like they could have done more, but I also see that it was cut short. So me judging it, I have to just rely on the way I felt reading it, because I feel like it didn't get a fair shake. Like, how do you create this book, this legacy book? It felt like a cash grab at that point. Like, why do we not get more issues? But all in all, I enjoyed what I saw. I did have an issue with the art initially, but that was just me being like a Generation X purist. Like, I want my Bachalo or whatever, or Dodson or something. But no, but I did, once I got into it, I was like, okay, no, this is what I want to see. And if it came back, I would absolutely love for it to come back, because I think every single iteration of X-Men has a space carved out in this new Dawn of X, except for Generation X. There's no, they're all split up, or like at Skin. What are you even doing with Skin? Like, he is, when you have Kamala Khan and you have Reed Richards, there's no way that Skin shouldn't be a prominent character. But I would love for a Generation X book to come back in their own Academos habitat area, whatever, and focus on them. You know, shake it up, but focus on them.
I have very conflicted feelings about the Christina Strain Generation X series. I love the art. I know some people are put off by it, but I think the weirdness is just like really perfect for the characters and for Generation X, like as a title. And I like a lot of what the series does with like the newer characters or like background characters, like really making Nature Girl prominent is nice. And then like there's the gay romance between I'm blanking on their names. Benji and Nate.
Hindsight and
Morph.
And Morph, yeah. I liked that romance. I think it was really sweet, but I wasn't a huge fan of how Monet was sort of made into a villain, and it wasn't really acknowledged that like she was like it wasn't her fault, because like it was M-Plate. So I didn't love how she was sort of villainized in that way. But there's a lot of good stuff in that run.
Jubilee got her powers back.
Yeah.
I didn't like that.
Oh, you did it? Oh no.
Yeah.
No,
I'm with you. There was something about when it's weird. It was a weird storyline to take her on, but something about Vampire Jubilee allowed writers to let go of annoying hanger-on Jubilee that she was when she first appeared. It allowed her, and the same thing with Shogo, it kind of gave writers the opportunity to let go of the Jubilee that a lot of people make jokes about. I do enjoy her in Excalibur now, but for a little bit there in Uncanny, they kind of put her right back to where she was, complete with the dungaree booty shorts for no apparent reason.
She is 30. Like, that is a grown woman. God.
But yeah, I'm
definitely
like
wearing booty shorts right now. And I am 30.
It's lesbian fashion, okay?
It is.
It's the gay fashion.
It's
It's
hot.
the gays.
Well, yeah, okay. No, I retract my statement then. You're right. You're right.
It's further proof that lesbian Jubilee is it.
there you go.
That's the one.
I liked the idea of the new Generation X, and I do like the execution of it. I think it was Keenan, you were saying that it did have the same theme, and it was a good successor in that way. I just wish that it had the same vibe as the original Generation X did, and it definitely didn't. But looking at it as separate from Generation X, I can see a lot of good points, but it didn't hit where I would have wanted a new Generation X to hit. As far as the legacy of the actual comic, it depresses me because I feel like it's not really there, because of any team of the X-Men, the Generation X kids got the worst out of it.
Yeah.
You had Gaia vanish into the night. You had Mondo, who was a houseplant. You killed off Sync before the comic ended. You killed off Skin before he came back into the comics. You had Jono, who literally had his fate. He like exploded. He went back and forth between having a face or not every time he appeared. Jubilee became a vampire, and then Monet got kidnapped by her brother again. Literally, and then Paige, whatever happened in Wolverine and the X-Men, I've avoided reading that. But they pretty much all got treated horribly, consistently after the comic ended. And with the Monet being the only one that really has gotten good, consistent, positive appearances. And now finally Jubilee. But the rest, they've not been treated well. And it's a shame.
I was about to say, Sync just got back up.
He just got on
there.
Yeah,
that's brand new.
I got so used to him being dead, I kind of forgot. But yeah,
we all did. Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like with Chamber, with Husk, with Skin, with Gaia, there's still so much that could be done. And I don't count Chamber and Mondo's appearance in New Mutants, because why were they there? They didn't do anything.
Bro,
I always forget they were a part of that team, honestly.
They did nothing, and it was never really explained why they were there. Like,
because the reason why it was because Hickman likes them. He's like going on record saying that he likes.
Well, he didn't do a good job of showing us.
Hey.
Now listen, I'm just telling you what he told me. You gotta ask him.
I will make a clip of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so grateful for Hickman though, because Generation X wasn't getting no love until Dawn of X.
I feel like while I hadn't really read the new run of Generation X, I think a new thing for them in the Krakoa era would be. And side note, I like Jubilee getting her powers back, but I wanted it to be the growth that she got as the vampire. I don't like vampires, so like give her flashy powers again. But like I think that the Generation X, the group anyway, on Krakoa and how they can be pushed forward would have to be something kind of like what's being done with the New Mutants, but maybe a little bit better executed as far as the team coming back together, but it's not just getting the band back together, because there's an easy way for a lot of these characters to get trapped into that. Yeah. All right, here's another run of them getting back together and doing the same thing they did like 15 years ago. I think if you got them as Generation X and had like, there is a slew of like Krakoan kids who could be the new like Generation X kids that they were actually teaching, I would sign up for that. That like little thing with the antennas and like the little butterfly girl. Yeah. I want to
I
read
mean,
that.
you had mentioned New Mutants, and that little subgroup in New Mutants are perfect for a Generation X team of
Exactly.
Anole and Cosmos and that weird water boy I've never seen before in my life,
Rain
and
Boy.
No Girl,
Gabby.
Gabby. Yeah, I feel like they
Mhm.
would make a perfect book. And I know someone had asked about how you can be outsiders in this Krakoan utopia, and they're exactly how you can be outsiders in this Krakoan utopia.
And also, there's various characters that Vida has created for the book that are explicitly trans characters. So that would be
Mhm.
like Leona, and that would be great to like have like, like these characters from this Generation X team.
I agree.
We're doing marvelous job there. It's pretty
Hello.
easy.
Give us
Call
your
us people.
Look, everyone. Yes.
Duna. What do you think about the Generation X legacy?
Oh, sorry, I didn't answer my own question. Eh, no, about the legacy of the book, I pretty much agree with you that this book has it. I think it's very important, but this character has not been treated well, and I don't think there's any book that comes ahead that really gives like the same feeling or vibe. So I feel like even if it's great, it doesn't have like a pretty like clear legacy, which is something that people could feel their sus. Like it's something that could happen and that should happen probably. And as for the Generation X, the other run, uh, we should do a show about it because it's complex, and I have complex feelings. I have things I like a lot. I have things I don't like at all, and Monet is on that list of things. And the kind of demonization of that character, which
Come on.
backtracks in the end, but I don't like things that backtrack in the end. And I know there's reasons, because like if you get canceled a book, you have to tie up all your stuff. I know there's reasons that don't have to do with the creative part of it, but with the business part of it. But yeah, and there's stuff I like a lot. There's a lot of stuff I like a lot. Bling is one of my favorite characters, even if Rain has talked about this before. We have our complex feelings about Bling.
Hey.
Some things are great. Some things
Yeah.
are.
Yes. A cringe.
But yeah.
So someone did just comment on how part of the legacy of Generation X is bringing Emma in as a teacher and a hero, and I agree that that's part of the legacy of Generation X, but it feels like they try to pretend it's not.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people attribute New X-Men and Morrison to Emma Frost being a hero, like she wasn't being a teacher for 75 issues plus annuals and specials.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a huge piece of the legacy of Generation X that people are trying to erase.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
It's interesting too, because you don't ever actually see Emma interacting with the Generation X kids anymore like that. It's like you'll constantly get some callbacks to her with the new X-Men. Heck, even the Hellions will get a call, or be treated and reminded that she got these kids killed. But when it comes to Generation X, you don't see her like working. You don't really see her thinking about us.
Swords or Ten of Swords, wasn't there like a very short scene between Emma and Monet?
Yeah.
Oh, that was bad. That was really bad. That was when I think was it Monet who was it? Oh no, I'm thinking of Danny. Someone tried to give
that was X Factor and Danny.
That was Danny? Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. I'm not sure if it was X of Swords or if it was one of the giant size X-Men where there was a brief tiny moment between M and Emma, and I would love if there was more of that, with like how if you look at Monet now in X Corp and Emma Frost in Generation X, they are very similar. And
that's probably why I can't really have them together, because then people will realize they like Monet more than Emma.
I mean,
yeah, you're right. I feel like they do need to acknowledge, even if it's just giving them a scene, acknowledging Emma's existence with them.
That she stole all her shit from Monet.
Come on.
Her whole shtick
Emma
is
stole a
Monet.
couple of things from a couple girls. If we want. But we won't do that
This
on
isn't
the
about
Generation
her.
X episode.
Yeah, I really like the in original Generation X, the like mentor relationship between Emma and Monet, because it's very tense, but it's also like it seems like they really like understand each other in a unique way, and so I would really like to see that brought back.
Yeah.
I think people with personalities that strong, when they do actually understand each other, it's like, are you allowed to curse on here? Can I curse?
Yeah,
Okay,
I've
it's
done
like,
it several times
like,
today.
if she's a bitch, she a bitch, and I'm a bitch. So like, we understand each other's bitchiness. So like, I like when the two of them are like at least on that kind of level with each other. Yeah. We should probably see a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
And Emma had interesting mentorship relationships with all the girls of Generation X, actually, like Paige and Jubilee, and even Gaia, that I think would be great to bring up with that dynamic, and how it reacts now that they're grown.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, I hate that the Cuckoos even exist now because they occupy a space that these other girls who aren't Monet, who were students of Emma, should occupy. Like, I get that they're like clones of her or whatever they are, and I like them, but like, I could just as easily see Paige, Jubilee, and like one of the Hellions girls or something as her three forces to be reckoned with, not to kind of shelve them like they aren't their own individual people, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's it.
That's a word.
I
We don't
think
need no more
especially
clones.
because Jubilee is a mom now, it would be very sweet to see her and Emma like talking about that maybe.
Oh yeah.
Who's the grandma for all of
I want Jubilee to refer to Emma as Shogo's grandma. That's all I
Yes.
want out of my life.
That'd be cute.
See, oh man.
There's
so
a lot that
frustrated.
can be done with a lot of these characters,
so
but it feels like it's and not really being pushed too hard. But it's there.
It's definitely there.
Yeah, wishful thinking, man. Because I mean, Shogo Frost, this little Asian baby being a Frost. What is it? What is it? Inherit all that Frost money? Like, come on. I just, okay.
That would be interesting. Would she like allow that? Is Emma nice like that now?
I think
secretly, yes. Emma, and this is the one thing that's been consistent with Emma when you factor in retcons, is that Emma has a humongous soft spot for her students.
Right.
And I think that's something that they don't put in enough in the books anymore, especially since she's no longer a teacher. But she's always had a soft space for her students, even if she showed it in weird ass ways. She had it for the members of Gen X. She had it for the Hellions. She had it for X-23 in New X-Men. And she takes some time for her to commit to her students, but when she does have a soft spot until the writers forget that she does.
Which, yeah.
They remember sometimes. She's had a couple, like, you know, but think of the children moments.
When she cussed out Tony's Captain America, what run is that with is it Tempest? Eva Bell. When her in the Black era, and she cutting to them like, you know, mutant kids have been dying, and yet where y'all be? So yeah, Emma, she ride or die when she ride or die.
In huge spoiler if you've not read X of Swords, but when Rockslide is killed and everyone else is so fast to move on, Emma Frost is the one who's like, guys, the kids are dying.
Yeah.
Man.
I was too busy looking at my fave girl crying for no reason in that run, so I tried not to focus too much on anything else.
Oh man, Emma. Oof. So yeah.
So I think we're done, and thank you all so much for coming to this one. Like, this one was a really great one, and I knew already when I invited you all, so I didn't have a doubt. I was like, this is gonna make itself. We're almost at 2 hours, and I was like, yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen. And for real, thank you so much. Thank you, Rain. come back anytime to talk like Generation
Hey,
X
I'm
and
always.
whatever. Because like with you, it's always great. It's like it makes me like find my love of the book more
Oh,
than I had it before coming to talk here. So yeah,
okay.
and thank you LC and Keenan from another relaunch for the same like for like the cool vibes.
It was a pleasure
you
to
know.
be here and like talk.
Thank you
Gen
so much
X
for
with
having
us.
us.
We like the whole reason we started another relaunch was we love talking comic books. So it's like doing that with other comic book fans. Yeah, that's
Absolutely. And we love to like this should be fun. So like yes, we're shady towards people's favorite characters or whatever, but like just laugh and have a good time.
And thank you, Sil, every time for coming. For like, it's really great to have you here, and for like defending lesbian jubilee as well.
I wouldn't even say
court
defending.
case.
I'd say spreading the good word of lesbian.
You got the converts.
Exactly.
Yes. Normally I would throw those pamphlets away, but I'm taking yours home. I'm gonna sign up.
So yeah, if anyone else wants to say anything,
Yes, I'd like to plug my little show.
yeah, it smells like Teen Mutants.
My little show. My
I-
love for Generation X. I love it. I devoted an entire show to just going through the appearances of Generation X characters. I'm just now finishing up the Phalanx Covenant and going right into, I think, the first issue, but it smells like Teen Mutants SLTM pod on Twitter. Please, check me out. I do a little exclusive Gen X talk. So I love this book. So that's that.
That's dope.
I'm plugging it in the comments right now. Okay.
Speaking of, thank you so much to everyone in the comments. We had a lot of participation. And even though we didn't read them all out loud, I have been keeping an eye on them, and I've been appreciating all the people chiming in.
Yeah, same. There were too many comments to like trying to like put all the words here, which is great. We don't usually get that, so yeah. Yeah, Rain. So I have been listening to the first 2 episodes so far. I'm excited. I'm excited to see where it goes. And if you ever need a guest, I could always tell the Dracula issue, especially when you get to the Dracula annual. Get me to talk vampires. I can put my piece.
I done wrote your name down.
So yeah, thank you all so much for real.